And features a different topic as a way to learn more about the civic and cultural life of Savannah. Is this anyone's first time tonight? Oh my goodness, hi y'all. Thank y'all for coming. Give a round of applause for everyone who came tonight. We have a really great conversation tonight. Before we get into that, just a couple of quick things, a few little housekeeping things that we have coming up. But also, I just want to point out what happened in Savannah yesterday with Black Lives Matter Savannah and with Urban Savannah. We should be really proud of that. We should be really proud that we're saying Black Lives Matter. Everyone in this room to reach out to them and offer their support and their resources, and also just have a conversation, because I think that's a conversation we need to have. We have an exciting month ahead of us for Emergent. As a continuation on our June Monday Meets Community, the Politics of Place, this Thursday, July 14th, Emergent will be working with the LPC to facilitate both comprehensive plan meetings. What does this mean? What is a comprehensive plan? It means that if we are vested in what this city looks like and feels like, as well as who it is built for and who it is designed for, then we urge every one of you to come down to one of the two open houses. There will be one at 10 a.m. to noon, and the second will be 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. They'll be held in LPC's Arthur A. Mendonça Hearing Room, 110 East State Street. I believe there might be free parking, which is like a huge plus on State Street on Wednesday or on a Thursday. We've got flyers in the back. We encourage you to look at the comprehensive plan on the LPC's website, and also to take the survey and just let them know what you think is important in Savannah, like affordable housing for everyone. On Sunday, July 24th, Emergent Savannah and Art Savannah invite our beloved community to kick back and come together for the 2016 Artists of Social Change exhibition. For one night only, artists will transform 4 front porches in the Starland District with the goal of inspiring conversation, creativity, and action, as well as paying tribute to activists of Savannah's past, activists whose shoulders we all stand on. Curated by Lisa Junkin Lopez, who's in the audience tonight, and Stephanie Raines, who is unfortunately not here yet. We will start in the Thomas Square Edible Garden and visit 4 porches, each with an accompanying theme interpreted by an artist. These artists will include House of Guns, Pat Gunn of the Ichi Institute and also of the Saltwater Players, Post Crunk, and Muriel Miller of the Avenue Cultural Arts Dance Studio. We'll also have lemonade and fans, which is really fancy in July. Woo! It'll be fun. It'll be hot, it'll be fun. And our next, as of yet named, Monday Meets Community is on August 8th, and it will center on gender and how genderqueer, gender fluid, and trans family here in Savannah have navigated that experience. As of now, we have confirmed participation from Candace Harnett of Agape Ministries and Justin Cole from Transcendence. Justin may be in the audience tonight, right over here. And the Reverend Michael Cheney is our facilitator. And now for the reason we are all here tonight, Savannah's storied landscape, what we change, what remains, and what we represent. Savannah is a complicated place, often made even more complicated by our history. And we really love our history here in Savannah. We are draped in it, it is everywhere we go. Almost everywhere you step, there is a reminder to our not so long ago past. But when we talk about the representation of history and how it unfolds into the present, we all have to ask ourselves, whose history gets told and whose does not? And what can we do as activated people in this room tonight who choose to come here and choose to listen to this conversation? What can we do to make this place a better reflection of who we are now and who we actually have been in the past? It'll be good. So first up this evening, we are very honored to have Richard Shinhoster, owner of Diaspora Marketplace, a brother Earl T. Shinhoster to visit the continent. He's the first vice president of the local NAACP chapter, as well as a lifelong community organizer whose work has echoed through this community and continues to do so. Please welcome Mr. Richard Shinhoster. Next, we have artist Jerome Meadows. Jerome Meadows is a full-time studio artist working and residing in a historic ice house in Savannah, Georgia. Originally from New York City, he's been living in Savannah since 1997. His focus on large-scale public art projects often call us to recognize what has been hidden in plain sight. Please welcome Jerome Meadows. We technically have two, but right now we only have one on stage. The other person is coming. She's here. That's fantastic. I'm sorry. Okay, it's the one day. Sorry. Next, we have two of the Walls of Hope leaders, artist Panhandle Slim and Savannah Youth City founder Beverlee Trotter. Walls of Hope was founded by Trotter, Slim, and Erica Hartnett, who may be also in the audience tonight. Walls of Hope was started as a means to spread positive messages across the city of Savannah using artwork. The project highlights unapologetically Black heroes like Nina Simone, Maya Angelou, Tupac Shakur, and Malcolm X, and shifts the idea of who we memorialize in the built landscape. Please welcome Ms. Beverlee Trotter and Panhandle Slim. Next, we have artist Lisa B. Watson. Watson is the head of Span the Gap, a project that asks the Savannah community about the Talmadge Bridge and if it is the right name for a landmark that represents our modern Savannah. Please welcome Lisa B. Watson. Last, but certainly not least, and who I will turn it over to for the rest of the evening, is our facilitator, Susan Pauls. Susan Pauls, PhD, by the way, is a cultural anthropologist whose work focuses on the intersection of urban studies, material culture, semiotics, and political economy. Pauls teaches anthropology at Savannah College of Art and Design, and she will be leading our conversation tonight. Please welcome Susan Pauls.
Thank you so much, Savannah, for having me. I'm very, very excited about listening to this conversation tonight. There's a lot that I could say about the relationship between the landscape and power and the history of Savannah. I'm only going to talk for a few minutes about this, and then I think that we should just hear from our panel, and then we'll have plenty of time for some question and answers at the end. I think that what I am going to say about it is that just like the ways in which the histories often represent only a certain version of history or a version of history that is told by the victors, the landscape is very much of an expression of power. And in terms of Savannah's built landscape, what we see a lot of the times is power being expressed in a sort of material way. The people that we have here tonight have identified specific sites in Savannah's landscape. Some of those sites have to do with infrastructure, like bridges or overpasses. Some of those sites have to do with what we might, I don't know, if we want to call it extra structure or, politics through aesthetics. I'm not really sure how we might want to characterize this, but through public art. Things that inspire us, that encourage us to think about things in a different way, that ask us to stop and revisit the ways in which we might have thought about Savannah in the past, or the ways in which we want to think about it in the future. So I think maybe we should I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to our panel. We can just maybe go one at a time. I'll introduce you, and you can talk a little bit about your project. And then at the end, we can come together and pick out some themes and ask some questions. So I think the first question, sorry, excuse me. The first person I think that we're going to hear from tonight is Lisa. And maybe the way that we want to start with this is just to let you sort of talk a little bit about why you identified the bridge as a site in our landscape that needs to be addressed. Clearly we have a sort of history of race, history of class, history of money that is being expressed in many ways in the bridge, and I'll just turn it over to you to go ahead and talk about that.
All right.
Thank you.
Can everybody? Okay, yes, everybody can hear me. Last year, I had a art show at City Hall. It was of 7 bridges, and I absolutely love bridges. I paint them, draw them. I love going over them. I realized after I did a city talk, a lot of the employees were really focused on the name of the bridge, and we're talking about what happened in 2013 when it was brought up in both City Hall and with the county. So I started doing a lot of research on what exactly happened and why, when there was a consensus that they wanted the bridge to be renamed, it never happened. It really comes down to a deadline in 2013, which the county did not get in time, unfortunately. There's a quote that says, we'll continue this possibly, maybe next year, which never happened, so that would have been 2014. I realized that the bridge was turning 25 years old, and I decided to have a 25-year celebration for the bridge, as well as getting 25 local artists to represent the bridge. Meanwhile, having a survey to see what the community thinks. And so far, we had a great art show. It was really beautiful. I know some of you made it there. I've had people coming out and helping me. There's 2 ladies in the audience right now that are really my support team right now. The survey is ongoing. Emergent sponsored the meeting for the survey for another month. So if you haven't filled out the survey, we'd love to hear what you think. It takes 2 minutes.
Would you like to say anything about why you think that the name should be changed?
Yes. Eugene Talmadge, if anybody knows his history, was basically a segregationist. As Jessica Libos, sorry Jessica, if you're in here, it said straight up KKK. He did not, he really focused his whole political career on segregation, and for someone who loves bridges so much, I cannot, it looks like a shroud to me right now with the name, and I cross that bridge all the time because of my parents, my elderly parents. I think personally, until the name is changed, I think if it can symbolize what Savannah is today, and I think, everybody in this room is progressive and wants change, and is probably not a segregationist, I would imagine. I have a Facebook page, and I've been posting a lot of stuff about him and what's been going on, and I would, if you're interested, I would really recommend that you scroll down and read a little bit more about this man.
Well, considering the, sort of symbolic meaning of bridges, which usually has to do with bringing communities together, I think it's particularly, problematic to have someone like Eugene Talmadge being memorialized by the thing that is the most visible and spectacular thing, from miles around Savannah. So, I'm glad that we started with this issue of the bridge, and Mr. Shinhoster and I had been talking about this earlier tonight, and that is this issue of race and racism. And I know that this is just a very, very difficult conversation for all of us to have. Clearly, especially given the events of last week, this is a conversation that we need to have, and so I really appreciate your, starting us off with this very difficult conversation. So, I think maybe Jerome, you might want to chime in on this, and I know that you've been doing some work at Yamacraw, and perhaps that you'd like to tell us a little bit about your work with regard to public art and the ways in which it intervenes in the landscape.
I'd be delighted to. Can you hear me in the back? I've brought in some prepared notes. Memory does not serve me as it used to. We've been hearing the phrase Black Lives Matter a lot over the last year or so, coming as a forceful grassroots response to the all too frequent killing of black men at the hands of police officers. I would contend that there are other relevant phrases that are important as well. Black stories matter. Black history matters. Black heroes matter. And of course, that implies that they should matter as much as white stories, white history, and white heroes. For if you dismiss, overlook, and erase these uplifting aspects of a people, then they begin to feel marginalized, disregarded, and non-existent. When you cease to acknowledge and celebrate the positive aspects of a race or class of people for an extended period of time, the negative features begin to develop and emerge, both within that group of people, as well as from the point of view of the society in which they exist. There are many ways of showcasing and expressing what matters favorably to a people. As an artist, I see culture as an essential and effective means of accomplishing that. It has been that way throughout the existence of humankind. And it has been that way in Savannah to a well-developed and yet selectively limited extent. With its historic squares populated by statues and plaques honoring a certain segment of its population. Is this feedback? Right, problem not? Okay, I shall proceed. Honoring a certain segment of its population, this city prides itself on the importance of its history and goes to great lengths presenting it to the world as such. And yet this prevailing portrayal is selective, not dealing nearly enough with the black stories that matter, the black history that matters, the black heroes that matter. I commend artists like Panhandle as an example for his independent efforts in bringing some of these stories out of obscurity and into the public realm. I would urge that any talk about increasing public activity in Savannah be inclusive of these untold stories as well, with respect to both content and the artists who create these works. And so, with respect to my own involvement with public art in Savannah, I must point out that in 1997, I was commissioned to design and create Yamacraw Square public art project. Seen as the city's newest square, it was designed to finally acknowledge and commemorate both the African American legacy within the city and the importance of the Yamacraw natives, the only such memorial of its kind in Savannah. It took 10 years to fund it into existence, and today that square and the commemorative artwork within it unlike any other square in the city, has for all intents and purposes been disregarded and allowed to fail in its purpose. Why is that? That purpose being to convey that the stories, the history, and the heroes of Black lives, as well as Native American lives, matters as much as anyone else's. We have within our midst a long-neglected public art project, Yamacross Square, that affords the opportunity for us to reassert that all of our stories, all of our history, and each and every one of our heroes are equally deserving of acknowledgement and commemoration. I say this not simply because I designed and created that project, but because your lives matter, Black lives matter, and art is a powerful tool for substantiating that fact. Thank you.
Thank you so much for explaining that. As a cultural anthropologist, I teach anthropology at SCAD, and one of the things that I do with my Anthro 101 students is to explain to them that one of the ways that culture works is through lots and lots of small acts by individual people. And because of that, the acts of a single person, although they may not appear to be particularly spectacular in the very beginning, can in fact gain momentum and eventually have a tremendous impact on the people around them. So for me, I really appreciate even the acts of a single person attempting to intervene in the landscape in a way that is cutting against the grain, or talking back to power, which is always difficult. And I really feel like the project that Beverlee and Scott are doing is also operating in this vein. And I know for me, I have had a really wonderful time traveling around Savannah and seeing all of these pieces up and seeing who's there, seeing what they're doing. And I just wondered if y'all could talk a little bit about why you decided to do it, what you hope to achieve, and what things have surprised you in doing this project. And sort of going off what Jerome is saying about stories in the landscape.
Good evening. My name is Beverlee Trotter. I am the director of Savannah U City. So I will begin with telling you what Savannah U City does. Our mission is to build leaders, to build productive citizens through engagement, uplift, accountability, and the removal of institutional and environmental barriers. With the Walls of Hope project, our goal was to do just that, to uplift, to post things that would hold not only young people but the community accountable, to push positive things where there was negative things, to give hope where there was no hope. Our goal was to, when young men and women and individuals in the community would walk by, they would see something that would kind of change the direction, would kind of give them something else to think about, something else to hope for. We all know that in Savannah a lot of hope is missing, a lot of hope is lost. So we try to instill that with the Walls of Hope project. Our technique was to alter the negative or self-defeating thought patterns by deliberately changing that process. So when someone is walking by or going through a neighborhood or seeing things, they would look and think. It's sort of like a history lesson. That was our goal, to push the positive in areas where there were negative. We assumed that our community had enough negative things going on. The media, the news press, there was just so much negative in the community. So we got together and said, how can we push hope? That's something that Savannah needed. How do you push hope? We can push it through the newspaper, but we don't own a newspaper. We can push it through the news, but we don't own a news station. So the only way we could think of that was cost effective and that we felt was going to be powerful was to put those posters up in places where people wouldn't even wake up. They would wake up one morning and just see some hope. They would see something positive. And that was the goal behind the Walls of Hope. Scott?
Hello. Somebody put my name on Facebook. So I got involved. Someone said, we need some positive messages up. I had already been putting I paint on wood. And I've already been putting paintings up all around Savannah and across the United States. I just nailed them to a telephone pole. The paintings I put up at first were put up more in white neighborhoods and agitated, and put black faces in white neighborhoods where people would have to learn a history that most of us haven't learned. That was really important to me. And my art took a radical turn right after Trayvon Martin. That's when I was like, this could happen in my neighborhood, and I don't want it to happen in my neighborhood. And I spread off to other neighborhoods. 5 years later, probably, I don't know how long, we started in December, but I said, sure, I'd love to do a painting. We decided on what to do, what would not agitate too much, but would get a good message, and what could be safe. And I do remember one thing, and this is, I knew it could come back to get you, but I don't care. We need to get in touch with the city. No, we don't. They're the problem. And that was right during that mayor race and all that crap. I was just agitated. I did not want to deal with any of that. So I still feel that way. But this is a very positive thing. It's been great. We've made a lot of friends. I think from what people tell me in community, they like it. They smile. We have people pull over and can't believe you put that up there. And it's just a great experience. That's it. I don't have much to say really. The paintings go up, the paintings talk, and that's it.
One of the other things that I tell my students is that culture is very conservative. What that means is not in a sort of Democrat or Republican way, but that culture has a momentum, and that it sort of inherently tries to reproduce itself. And when people try to change it, it's very difficult, and it also a lot of times comes with risk. Sometimes that's a risk worth taking, but it's always something that requires a lot of energy and effort. And so, having said that, I know that each of you in my individual conversations with me have explained to me times when you've had pushback, you've had to work really hard, things have surprised you, people have said no to you, people have complained about what you're doing, and I think that in some ways, we can sort of take that as a sign that maybe you're doing something right, in a sense. So, it takes a lot to generate a sort of reaction from society. So, those kinds of pushbacks, I think, can be taken as something that's positive, even though it can be hard or discouraging or even feel a little bit painful at times. The landscape that we live in does reflect a history. A history that's written in a certain way, that reflects certain people's interests, that reflects ideas about race, that reflect ideas about class, that reflect ideas about who should be in power and who shouldn't be in power. I do not think that it's at all a coincidence that the presence, for example, of Native Americans is practically invisible in this town. I mean, you have to look really hard and with a great deal of intention in order to find evidence of that population here. Exactly, right? You have to find it, you have to look for it. It's not something that, every single person around here just knows about. That they should know about it. So the landscape reflects those ideas and reflects those histories and reflects those powers, but it also does things. The landscape does things. It encourages us to do certain things. It encourages us to congregate. It encourages us not to congregate. And I think that, for example, I'm going to ask Mr. Shinhoster to talk a little bit about the flyover. We know from histories, urban histories, all across in which infrastructure, car infrastructure, has either had a tendency to destroy communities or to make communities. And I think that there's a rhyme and a reason that we can look to that explains why flyovers are built across certain parts of certain kinds of cities and what they do to those urban fabrics that, you know, have not just a tendency but an effect of tearing those communities apart. And so I'm just going to ask Mr. Shinhoster to talk about the Savannah flyover or whatever else you want to talk about.
Thank you. I certainly want to commend Emergent Savannah for allowing for this dialogue. I'm a native Savannian that grew up here, grew up in a little area of Savannah called Carver Village, out on the west side. A place now that the city has decided that an arena can be built. Grew up where there were dirt streets, and we played in the mud when it rained. So we've seen the landscape change over time. Grew up at a time in this community when it was controlled by 2, maybe 3 or so major corporations. And outsiders weren't welcome, even by that power structure and even by people of the same ethnicity, because the power had to be kept. So people like myself and my friends and classmates just couldn't wait to leave Savannah upon graduation from high school or from college. And what did that do to the landscape? It took a whole segment of people away from Savannah, and they made a contribution in other cities. And as a result, we think Savannah suffered. So today, as I look at Savannah from my perch on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, I'm happy to see new faces, hear new conversations about where we can go from here. I know where we have been. I know where we are now. But even at my stage in life now, it's exciting to think of where this city can go. And I think it's because of these kinds of conversations that it's possible for that to happen. I had to learn how to say Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard because when I grew up here, it was called West Broad Street. And West Broad Street was a major business district in Savannah. I know many times you'll hear that it was the African American business district, and that's true. But that was not all of the people that made up that landscape. It was a very diverse community. There were several ethnicities that operated and lived in this area. And then it changed. In 1968, I owned a business on that street. I owned a record shop. We sold records. And we sold records because there was no other place in Savannah or the surrounding area where African Americans could find music that they wanted to hear. Jazz and blues and even gospel was difficult to find. And we did that. But it was short-lived because the powers decided that that area, that entire area was expendable and that it could better be served by a federal highway that would allow the transportation of military personnel. And that was one of the major reasons for I-16 to come into this area along a route that already had been established as a way to move trains, passengers, and freight traffic. It didn't matter that it came through right directly through a community that exists and had existed for hundreds of years, at least a couple of hundred years, not hundreds, but at least a couple of hundred years. That did not matter. There was a beautiful piece of architecture that existed there. I'm sure some of you have seen pictures of the Union Station, that if it was there now, it would be a drawing card for this community just by itself. It didn't matter. The power to be decided that needed to go so that this whole area could be changed, that landscape could be changed. So there was a grid, there were communities, there were many of the streets, Jones Street, Taylor Street, Barron Street, extended almost to Cotton Village. There was a grid, there were people who lived in those areas. As a teenager, I sold newspapers, and that was my newspaper route. All of those streets, Bolden Street, Gwinnett Street, those were neighborhoods. And all of that went away after 1968 when we brought in I-16. And if that was not enough, you built a bridge across it in order to get to Montgomery Street because we wanted a civic center there. We wanted a way for people that lived on the south side to be able to access immediately that new civic center. So we built a bridge across that street. And what we saw over the next years was the demise of a community. It changed the landscape. My interest is that we go back and try to correct some of the ills that we created, and that we remove the flyover. I still want the building there. It was a struggle. We purchased it during a time when we had the record shop and paid our mortgage over the years when there was no income. But I don't know why I held on to it. To this day, I ask myself, why did we hold on to that building? I guess because we couldn't sell it. One of the reasons. We couldn't sell it because nobody wanted to be in that area. There was not a market for it, so we just held on to it. Sometimes there's divine providence in your life like this, because we're still there with that building, and we want to see development continue southward. I mean, if you look at MLK now north of that flyover, it's vibrant. And it's growing each time I ride down, it looks like a new hotel is coming up somewhere in that area, which I'm not opposed to. But it stops there. And I have to ask the question, why does it stop there? Could we not be a better and a stronger and a more dynamic community if we extended it simply beyond that? As a businessman, I know that we need more territory to open new markets. And that lane's there. I served on, I'm going to cut this off in a moment so you can ask some questions, but I served on a couple of panels that looked and did a study on this, served on the board of Savannah Development and Renewal Authority that did some of the early work on determining that this city would be better off if we developed MLK all the way to 52nd Street. And that one of the things we would want to do, of course, is to remove the flyover. And so since I served on the panel, I said, well, now, you know, my brother's name appears on the flyover. We had to work hard to get that done. So the family doesn't want to just throw that away. But out of 9 acres of land that would be created by removing the flyover, a new square, a new downtown square could be established. The beginning of it is already there. If you look, there's some beautiful trees already there, but now they just are dwarfed with this big structure that's adjoining them. But this square would be there, and we just asked, and we tried to put this in each time we talk about this. Earl and my brother would be perfectly happy to have his name on a square. He's no longer with us. He killed in a car accident in 2000. But we know him, and we know that he would be perfectly happy to do that. This is a long-term project. I commend the city for at least taking the next step to say to the state and to federal authorities that we will stand with this recommendation to remove the flyover. So I'm glad to have this conversation and to let you know when you see it, now you've seen the Shinhoster, that we are in favor of the flyover coming back. Thank you.
Thank you so much for telling us that. I'm sure that there's a lot of people here that have driven under that underpass 1,000 times and don't know too much about the history of it or what used to be there before. And I think that just knowing about how it happened, what might be possible, gives many of us a totally different experience of being in that place that's clearly out of human scale, like most of the rest of the very walkable, downtown. That people are struggling with in terms of trying to think about how to develop in a responsible way that maintains, a certain kind of livability that I think we can, talk about and that we all desire. So perhaps the best thing for us to do now is maybe we could just open it up for questions. I'm sure people have questions or comments. Does that sound good to y'all? Okay, all right. I don't know your name. Can you?
Artist one. I can't wait to see the flyover gone. There have been several of the wonderful designs put forward. It's a long-term project, but absolutely worthwhile. And that'll be fun. Lisa, I wanted more information about how to sign this petition, how to get on your Facebook. I didn't catch that when you talked.
Okay, it's a Survey Monkey, I can tell you right now. And there are cards over on the table that has it, but if I recall, it's Service Monkey.
Survey?
Oh, I'm sorry. Survey Monkey.
I'm just too hip on this. If I go to Google and I put Survey Monkey? Okay.
Yes, you could do that. Or you could just type in Survey Monkey /r/SAV Bridge.
R like Robert?
Yep. That's the link.
Thank you.
Where's
Oh, she got one.
No, that's not the link. It's got it. It's surveymonkey.com.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
What is it? It's right
Well, you got the card now. I can't remember what I was at.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. We have 1,045 people that have taken the survey thus far. I would love more.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Lisa, what do you intend to do with the results of the survey?
I have someone who's going to help me finalize the survey, and we are going to take the results to the city and the county. When the county representative had said that he would love to have a town meeting and see what the people are thinking, well, I completed that for him. So I've saved them some time. I think 1,045 people are a lot more people than that a town hall meeting might have filled. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Clinton.
Jerome, how can we help put pressure on the city to take a greater interest in the Yamacross Square?
Great question.
And why? Is there any difference in that square versus the other squares? That might be some sort of reason, although not a good one.
To answer, to respond. Hello?
Can you repeat his question?
He was asking what we can do to pressure action on improving the condition. And then the second part of the question was what makes it different from other squares. To deal with the second part first, it's in the middle of a low-income housing community. And as a person who engages in public art, the fact that it's there undermines or underlines its purpose. Because as I said at the end of my reading there, public art in particular is a powerful tool for bringing forth positive stories and positive representations of people. And the fact that that history exists there is important not only to the people in that community but to the city at large, particularly in a city that really speaks so highly of its history. I know that at one point, Clinton, when you were with the gallery there, that your group took an initiative to try to bring some interest. What has happened is I got together with Ellen Harris, who's with the NPC, and she was appalled by the condition of this park, this memorial, this square. And as a result of that, I came up with a budget of what it will cost to bring it back to its glory. We presented that to the City Council, to NPC, through all the permitting processes that were necessary, and got approval. It got before the City Council, and they approved what needed to be done, but were disinclined to fund the process. So at this point, we've got all of our ducks in a row with respect to what needs to be done, how much it will cost. There just needs to be a champion of this project that will ensure that somehow, some way, through the city or each of us coming out of our pockets with a couple of dollars, that the $100,000 needed to bring it back to its glory will be raised. I'm in an awkward position. I know one of the questions that came to me was, a year ago I completed a similar project in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And the comparison between the two could not be more glaring nor more embarrassing. I recently had some friends from Minnesota who were visiting me in Savannah. And we had dinner downtown, and I'm walking into their car, and I began to realize that we're walking towards Yamacraw. And I had this awkward, painful experience of being too embarrassed to take them to the project that I had created. Yet in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, if I sit for 5 seconds at a coffee shop, thousands of people come up to me, hugging me, embracing me, and almost each one of them say, "Thank you for this gift to our city." That project commemorates an African burying ground dating back to the 1600s that was built over. And that happens where you had enslaved people. It was rediscovered, and the city raised the funds in half the time it took to raise the money here. The project was completed, and it has been this huge success. Telling the stories, Black stories matter, Black heroes matter. We've got those stories here in Savannah, and in the case of Yamacraw, we're letting those stories be dismissed. So in answer to the question, Clinton, thank you for it. I don't know, call your councilman, call somebody and say, look, this is abhorrent. Get your tourist friends, because that seems to be what rocks the money tree. To say, oh my God, I went by this square and there was trash and parts of it were missing. Can you imagine if you went to any other square in Savannah and there was trash and parts of it were missing? That doesn't happen because it's not allowed to happen. Yamacraw is on the other side of the tracks.
Mr. Dare Dukes.
This is a great talk, and really I'm surprised that in a conversation about the landscape, what he has mentioned the keyword gentrification, and I'm sure that when they were pitching that idea for that flyover with the city, they were probably talking about how it was going to bring this and that to that neighborhood, and it was going to probably bring jobs and probably bring some money. Because investment is always good. And I'm curious to know from anybody who knows, who's been around this landscape for a long time, what it typically looks like when investment is made. Because what typically happens when an investment is made in a community is, especially low-income communities, the communities that are there get displaced. They rarely get to share in the benefits of that. So I'd love to know from somebody who's been around a while if they can talk about that. I think you already have a little bit from your discussion of the flyover, but I'm also curious if anybody has an idea on how you make investment in low-income communities so that everybody can share in the benefits of it and you're not displacing or upending the community.
I believe the question was, how do we prevent gentrification from segregating a community? I think that's done by intentionally not allowing it to happen. As development moves into areas, that intentionally there remains affordable housing. One of the major problems with development in areas that were low income from the beginning is that once they have been redeveloped, they're no longer low income. They are not even, in many cases in Savannah, middle income. They are expensive. So people who originally lived in these areas are no longer able to, not because we can look at it and say, well, we're going to discriminate against a certain group of people. We simply price them out of the market. So I believe that we have to intentionally decide if there's going to be development, that accompanying that development is affordable, not low-class housing, but affordable housing, not only for African Americans who may have lived into that area, but for young people who have not amassed the income level yet in order to be able to live there comfortably. I've had an opportunity to look at some other cities that have addressed this problem, and usually that's one of the factors, is to make sure that there is affordable housing at the same time that we deal with high-end housing, and that businesses are allowed to, that it's mixed use, so that there is employment possibilities also that exist. This is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's been had in Savannah, but it's like some other things, it just disappears. There are studies that address your problem, your question rather, that's gathering dust somewhere. That we go back and demand that these things be brought forward again, so that as this development continues, especially once the flyover comes down, and all of a sudden you discover that there is many acres of land ready for developers to develop who have the money, that the only way it can be done, that we intentionally say there must be affordable housing also.
We know it's crystal clear from, we know from research, urban research, that the evidence is crystal clear that high density mixed use is the best kind of environment, not just socially, but also economically. So one does, I think, have to ask why these piles of research that's readily available and very clear are not, being drawn upon in order to think about responsible development, because obviously we do have to move forward with the time, but there's ways in which we need to make sure that everybody benefits from the kinds of changes that are taking place and that can take place. Let's see. Yes, go ahead.
I would also say that we should include the community that we're going to go in and improve. You can't I think that some of those people who are making decisions to do this gentrification or to improve these communities haven't talked to the community. I think that once you bring the community to the table, you have that discussion, because I think it's unfair to kind of improve or try to fix someone, you know, without including them or finding out even if that area or that person is broken. So to me, I think that would be a perfect answer to your question, to include the community, the people who you're going to do this process with, to include them at the table.
Right, because we don't want to develop at them, we want to develop with them, right, is the idea. Lisa Junkin, did you have a comment, and then you?
Yeah, I have a comment, and then I promise we'll get to a question too. So my name is Lisa Junkin Lopez. I'm the executive director of the Juliet Gordon Low Workplace downtown, and I'm here with my fantastic curator, Cheryl Lang. And so for folks who read the Savannah Morning News, you know that for the last 2 weeks there's been a really large discussion in that forum, at least, about this historic site that many, many folks in Savannah and around the nation know about, and that there is you know, a group of people, in particular indirect descendants of Juliet Gordon Low, who are troubled by some of the changes that have been taking place at the workplace. And I won't get into details, but there is one room in particular that has moved in the past 2 years from being what we think about as a period room to being a more interactive exhibition that takes a room that was traditionally a library space, right, and transforms it by thinking about what a library could look like that's by, for, and about girls and women. And of course, Juliet Gordon Low is the founder of Girl Scouts, and we're a site that's visited by many, many thousands of girls every year. And I think we're the only museum in the nation that really has girls as a primary audience. And so we're trying to think about how do we talk about the legacy and the history of this incredible woman in a way that reaches girls today. And of course, there are folks in the city who are really committed to a curated room presentation within a historic house, and who feel like to move away from that is problematic. And so I've been thinking a lot about history and how we present history in the last few weeks. And I've been thinking a lot about the idea of authenticity, because it seems to me that, you know, in this world that I inhabit, which is historic house museums, that the premise is that there's this way of doing rooms by putting period furniture in the room that brings us to some kind of truth, right? That leads to authenticity, truth, and understanding about the past through the furniture. And I think the direction that the workplace has taken is a means of kind of opening up a dialogue about, well, how do we talk about that history, and where do we find truth, and how do we think about what authenticity looks like? Because the more I think about it, the more I think that, you know, there are a lot of different ways of conveying a truth, and that even if all of the furniture was from the room originally, let's say, from the family originally, I think we might ask questions about what truth that conveys, and does it convey the truth about the servants or the enslaved people, for example, who work in that house, right? Like, does the furniture tell that story, right? And so I'm just thinking a lot about authenticity, and thinking about in South Africa during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that took place there after apartheid. There was a conversation that took place about there being multiple kinds of truth, whether it's forensic truth or a personal truth or a community or a restorative truth that helps us move forward together. And so since there are you know, there are so many artists on this panel, and you all think about aesthetics and you think about form, and I guess what I see in the changes to the workplace, and also the conversations around town that have been taking place around it, I think about the fact that sometimes as these narratives shift, so too do the forms shift by which we tell those narratives. And so I'm just curious for you all as artists in the room, how do you think about the role of aesthetics in history, and how do you think about the role of aesthetics in bringing in change?
question of the relationship between aesthetics, authenticity, and art. Maybe, Jerome, maybe do you want to say something about this? Or I know this is something that you think about.
Yes.
Or anybody else.
Okay. Authenticity obviously is important. History is, as I think was pointed out at the beginning of this program, unfortunately, a lot of our history is written by the victors. And so it brings into question the whole idea of authenticity. Again, the project that I worked on in Portsmouth and the project here has an authenticity based on a truth that eventually emerged, one that had been buried by the victors. The power of art, I think, is that it may well tell the story of a particular people, a particular person, but the language of art transcends the individual and becomes expressive within a group of people. Portsmouth, for example, is 1 or 2% black. So all of those folks coming up to me, hugging me, are mostly white. And there is an authentic feeling of ownership and pride and some embarrassment that most of them had never been taught that slavery existed in New England. So if you want to talk about a shift, many of the people who donated big dollars to that project did so having learned for the first time that their newly white existence had been stained by the horror of slavery. My job as a visual artist was, for example, one of the figures is a male figure representing the first enslaved person in Africa. And I worked on these figures, the body, but when it came to his face, I had to spend hours upon hours getting over the anger that character must have been experiencing by way of being ripped from his home, brought to this place that he had no knowledge of, and then worst of all, from my perspective, this white stuff starts falling out of the sky and it gets deadly cold. He was pissed. And I had every reason to put that anger in his face, but I realized that he needed to communicate something that transcended that anger. There needed to be an authenticity of his humanity, so that you as the viewer, who stands on street level, would not walk up and say, oh my God, that's an angry black man. Even though he had every reason to be. But there's an individual who happens to be black, who suffered horribly, and yet he has a sense of dignity and strength that I can identify with. I don't know if that answers your own question, but that's my best shot.
I think that art is unique. I think that authenticity comes in the eye of the beholder. I think that when an artist does things, he's doing it through his lens. They're doing that through their skill set. And it first starts with respect. Whatever culture, whatever he's painting, we must respect that artist and what he's doing. And whatever his authenticity is, it's not going to be the same as another. Unless you have a bunch of people just painting the same thing, then there's no need for particular art, because everybody's painting the same thing. It's just like someone who's singing. We can sing the same song, but we'll all sing it differently. But it doesn't take away from the authenticity of that song. Just that we're all different. So when we express artists express themselves, we have to take that into consideration. Whether it's about slavery, whether it's about love, whatever it's about, we have to accept how that artist portrays it, how it comes out of their heart, and how it portrays from their mind. So to me, that's how you define authenticity. There's normal and there's expressive art. So we have to be able to distinguish it and respect the artists as they do their thing. That's my opinion.
Perhaps one of the ways that we might be able to bring all these different projects together is to think about, aesthetics really as politics by another name. I think that's really at the core of it, why these different kind of aesthetic interventions in the landscape can have such a profound impact on the ways in which people are interacting with each other. I think we have time for 2 more questions. I know you had a question, so do you want to go ahead with your question?
Just a quick comment. Lisa, how about Andrew Bryan Bridge or Tamachichi Bridge? And I think that's an excellent point. If children, and I saw it with Panhandle Slim and Beverlee. They put a poster up on the side of a convenience store. While they're putting the poster up, a guy comes by, he doesn't want his picture taken, but somehow he stops and he wants to read, he wants to look at, he wants to see what they put, because somehow that connects to him. Somehow Tupac connects to him. Somehow some artist, some community person, somebody within his community that he's not even aware of, recognize that in order for this to be a community, you got to consider the folks in it. And so one of the concerns that I have is with an area, so like between 33rd and 35th Street on Montgomery, you have an area that was historically a working space, living space for Africans who left the plantation, came to Savannah, took work. There were a set of row houses that had been there since the 19th century. Not only did they tear the houses down, I had no problem with the green space, but they're going to put a police precinct back there. So what does that say to the black youth who live on the other side of that street? What are those aesthetics? That now here's a space that someone could have associated in a valuable way with their cultural history. It's been torn down, and what's going to come in its place is something that to them is a fort. Something to them that represents the occupation of the space, and this comes along with all these strangers that are now moving into their space, and what they bring with them is not a concern for their aesthetic, for their authenticity, but, well, I won't speak to that. And there are other places, there are concrete, easy spaces that we can go into. In West Savannah, west of MLK, is a foundation community. It is where Africans, the ones who worked in plantations, it is where those Africans came and lived for hundreds of years. It is a place where up until the 1930s, Native Americans lived there. That place could be a destination for people who were interested in African American culture, Southern African American culture. It could be a destination for anthropologists, for archaeologists, for artists. If it was developed in that way, it could be that kind of destiny. But who in the community is willing to look at that space and that way and see it something other than an extension of downtown Savannah? So you got my vote. And I certainly believe that it would demonstrate to a large segment of this community if you could change the name of that bridge. Eugene Talmadge was a virulently racist man. Not only that, he was a murderer. He authorized the murder of people to facilitate an election. He's a terrible person. So how far would that go? For a community to say, guess, look what, we don't know what that means, we don't know what the value it is, but we won't let this remain the namesake, a memorial to someone that is an affront to every black person that lives in this city or comes through here.
That you will help Lisa in getting the word out about her survey, because I think the more people that fill it out, the better.
Yes.
The more people that fill it out, the better chance I think she has of making this happen. So thank you so much for volunteering your help to get that survey filled out by everybody you know and everybody they know. I'll be back to you with information about how you can help do that. All right, we have time for one last question, and you were waiting so patiently, so thank you.
My name is Bill Winston. Stand up, Bill. Pardon me? How about this? Yeah, I've heard a lot about Savannah's history, and where we are now as a result of our history here. I'm really just curious. I just Googled Savannah, City of Savannah planning, long-term planning, and I haven't seen anything in terms of information about how Savannah might look like in, say, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. I'm kind of interested from an artist's perspective. How do you envision Savannah? How do you see it in 30 years? That's all.
Anybody want to take that on? 100 years.
I think the last emergent meeting was about the tide rising. So that could be a possibility. Let's hope not. I definitely, the last 8 years that I've been here 8 years, I've seen a lot of progression, especially in the art world. I'm hoping, there's 2 squares that are just itching for one of Jerome's sculptures. I'm just, that's what I hope for. And I also hope that there's more small businesses. I'm a little torn about these giant hotels moving in to neighborhoods and not talking to the community when they all have businesses, maybe some kind of tax break. I mean, I can't afford, I wanted to get a business myself and I couldn't afford it, so that's something I would hope for. Maybe at least in the next 10 years, 100 years, I don't know.
Yeah, 100 years is a bit too far out for me. But on a closer in perspective, Waters Avenue is my place in Savannah. And I expressed this to some folks. I see Waters Avenue being this vibrant community in which the seniors who have placed roots in that community are living side by side with artists and their studios. The thing about gentrification, as Mr. Shinhoster pointed out, is what's the intention? You know, if you intend to make as much profit as possible, then the human stories get sacrificed. But if your intention is to improve a community, then the profit thing gets reduced somewhat. In other words, let's give subsidies for property owners. Let's get subsidies for artists to come into these. There's a huge amount of housing stock on Waters Avenue. I mean, good grief, they're building new buildings when there's all these existing buildings. So why not give subsidies for artists to come into these communities? And I'm a shining example of the fact that as an artist, I'm living side by side with my neighbors rather than thinking, well, in a couple of years, I'm going to flip this puppy, raise the tax rates, and drive everybody out. So I guess I'm narrowing this down time-wise and geographically. Waters Avenue is supposed to be Savannah's art living community. And then we go over to the west side to have exhibitions and festivals and things of that nature. But drive up and down Waters Avenue one day, if you're an artist in particular, and feel the vibe. Feel the vibe. Let's make this happen.
Hoping it won't be the O.C. Welch Bridge in the future. And that's Mr. Ned. Earlier, what were some good things that happened with Walls of Hope? I met him the first time we put a painting up, and I went home and told my wife. It was just an amazing experience. I met this man, he's a scientist. He's talking about my paintings in forms of science and the whole environment and the reverberations that these little events will create. And I was kind of like, Then I met a man, and we talked about sunrise for a while, so it was, I got out of my little world into another world and felt much more comfortable in my world in so many ways. So that was big. I also, before they tore down those row houses, I went over there and got a lot of wood, and it's all in my backyard now. And I'm creating pieces of that. I already created two. This all ties in because I painted Amelia Boynton on one of them, and I thought she'd be a good person for the bridge. Since the Summer Bridge and marches she organized, she's from Savannah. She's one person I painted. I painted a few other ones. I'm going to paint a lot of other ones. I'd like those paintings that are on that wood to go inside the police station.
Yeah.
But that won't happen.
It would be good, it would be nice if, in terms of going forward, if the city had a plan to ensure, and I think this, Mr. Shinhoster gave to the point that you were making, to ensure a much more equitable distribution of resources. I think that is the only way that this city is going to survive and improve over time, and we have to not just expect for them to do this out of, you know, just some kind of, they think it's a good idea. We have to, as a community, as a city, everybody has to demand an equitable distribution of resources. That's it. Otherwise, there's no other way it's going to happen. So hopefully we can see that with some effort by everybody, individually, collectively. I think we're a little bit out of time, right?
The landscape of Savannah in 100 years, I like to see. Technology is probably going to change. It's probably going to be computers and robots and all that stuff around. I mean, the reality of it, right? That's what it's going to be. So none of us will probably be here.
I'm going to be here.
You'll be here? Well, I think I would like, I'll just go like maybe the next year or two. I don't know. I would like to see this room a little bit. I feel funny up here. I'm looking out in the audience and I see people, you know, and it feels weird up here because it's like trying to explain my culture to individuals who, you know, not really going to get it. So how do we together make our Savannah beautiful? How do we together in the next year or two or next day or next month, how do we change the way we see things? So when that gentrification comes, we're able to stand together, you know, include the communities that we're trying to improve. We'll include those people in the conversation. Because right now, I'm feeling like I'm really odd up here, and it's not and it shouldn't really be that way. And I hope I get invited again, but I think it's important to say, I love Emergent Savannah. I've come to many Emergent meetings, I mean many of them. I love the conversation pieces, I know I'm going off the question, but I love the conversations. I think you guys bring things to the table, but it's hard as an African American to sit up here and look out there and see these faces. You know, they're not all bad faces, but it's hard. And I want you to understand that, and I want you to feel this that I'm feeling right now. You know, I'm sure that, you know, none of you are on that negative side, but the Walls of Hope is just trying to push the positive in any way that we can with positive messages so that I won't feel the way I feel when I meet people like you or come into rooms like you. Hopefully there'll be a picture giving me some motivation or some inspiration. Say it's okay. So that's all the Walls of Hope is. We're just trying to push the positive. And I want you guys to know I appreciate Emergent Savannah. 100 years from now, I hope my son is still here, and I hope within the next year or two we can change the landscape of Savannah by including the people, that areas that we're trying to improve.
Thank you so much for saying that. We're going to have to stop now, although I'm sure that there's lots of conversations that are going to happen right in this same space afterwards. But thank you everybody for coming. Hope to see you again here. Come and talk to us, talk to each other, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.